Good morning, everyone. I have about 10:01, but I'll give a few more minutes for other people to join. They're coming in as right now, so we'll give them a few more minutes. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Office of Illinois Works, providing impactful wraparound and student support services. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Now, one of the things that you've asked us to do is to clearly articulate if there is a specific target audience for these sessions. In response to that request, you should have received a communication from Christine articulating the audience for this session, which includes wraparound service coordinators, student support service coordinators, wraparound service and support service supervisors, and relevant partners based on your referrals or based on the grantee's referrals. Now, this training is designed to provide grantees with the knowledge, the skills, and techniques necessary to deliver effective wraparound services and student support services in alignment with Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program best practices. Program staff providing wraparound services and student support services will be able to leverage the experience of other pre-apprenticeship providers and incorporate evidence-informed as well as evidence-based practices. Now, over the next 3 hours, we will take a deep dive into Illinois Works wraparound services and student support services. Now, you can reference some of the content of this session or this webinar in section 6 of the grantee manual, which is entitled Participant Wraparound Services and Student Support Services. Okay, now by the end of this training, you should be able to articulate Illinois Works equity focus, explain the data that impacts Illinois Works construction trades, describe the Illinois Works target audience, explain how wraparound services and student support services support Illinois Works core values, leverage brainstorming as a technique to generate new or innovative ideas, determine the necessary support for your participant population. You should also be able to respond to students' support alerts in the Illinois Works reporting system. You should be able to comply with ADA requirements, employ rapport building practices, practice active listening, cultivate relationships with your participants, and explain Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and to describe the roles of partnerships and list potential partners for your programs. Okay, I would like to take this time to introduce myself as one of the facilitators for today's session. I am Yolanda Clark. I work with NIU Center for Governmental Studies. I work with the Workforce Development Research Team as a senior research specialist. I worked for many, many years in affordable housing and community development, and in the context of workforce development, excuse me, in the context of affordable housing and community development, I work with workforce development programs to promote economic self-sufficiency initiatives. And I've also done research to understand from the perspective of program participants barriers to employment and economic self-sufficiency. And that's why I'm very, very excited to be a part of this session today as a facilitator. I've been in this workspace for a very long time. So at this time, Christine, who is the co-facilitator, if you would like to take this time to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Christine Flynn. You probably know me from my emails, but I am the grant manager for the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship program, and I am extremely excited to be here. Some of you may know I'm a social worker, so wraparound services and support services are kind of my thing. So I'm excited to talk about them today.
Okay, thank you so much, Christine. Please note that this session will be recorded and made available for review at the Illinois Works Partner Guide website. We will also share the TA webinar schedule later in this presentation. Okay. Do we have any questions before we move to the next section of today's session? If so, please feel free to unmute your line or post your question in the chat. No questions?
There are no questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Gia.
Okay, thank you, Yolanda, and welcome to everyone. So our second section, we are going to kind of walk through our Webex functionality so that we can all fully engage in the training today. We do have a very interactive session, so we are excited to be on this kind of new Webex platform that will allow us to be a little bit more interactive with all of you. And then we're going to go through and identify what you all hope to learn from this training. So for those of you who have been with us before, you will recognize that this is a different look for our Webex. So we want to just walk through some of the features that we're going to be using today. And I'm going to be asking each of you as I go through these different features, if you can please just test them out. So follow along, test them out. I'll be asking you to kind of interact a little bit just to make sure that everything is working. So the first one we are going to do is mute and unmute. So at the bottom of your screen, all the way to the left, you should have a little button with a microphone on it. If you can go ahead and please unmute yourselves now. Great. I'm hearing all sorts of people. Awesome. Okay, you can go ahead and mute yourselves again. So the second one is start and stop your video. So right next to that mute button, you'll have a start video button. Oh, there's everyone's beautiful faces. Good morning. Hello. Thank you so much for testing that out. The next one is our chat feature. So in the chat feature, you will be looking all the way to the right side and you will see that chat box. If you can go ahead and just write your favorite band in the chat box. Beyonce, great choice, great choice. They Might Be Giants, Prince and the Revolution. Oh, wow, awesome, great. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Oh, we got 2 Earth, Wind, and Fire fans, awesome. Thank you for testing that out. So the next feature we are going to do is the raise your hand feature. So at the bottom of your screen, you should just see a little hand icon. So that's how you raise your hand. So if you can go ahead and click on that. All right, I'm seeing hand raising. Great, great. And so then to lower your hand, you're just going to click on that button again. There you go. Perfect. So we will be using this feature today just to kind of get some of your feedback and interaction on some of the questions we have. And then The next feature is our emoji feature. So right next to that little hand icon, you're going to see a little smiley face with a plus sign. So go ahead and click on that. It will open a menu of different emojis. So if you can just throw one of those up on your screen for me. I got a smiley face from Lita. Thank you. All right, there we go. A bunny, a heart. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to see that all of these features are working. So in addition to these, we are going to also be doing breakout sessions today. So we'll test those in a little bit. But let's go ahead and move on. So as you can see, we do have a little bit more functionality as well with our videos. So please feel free. You don't have to have your video on. If you would like to have it on, please feel free to turn it on, but that's completely up to you. So the next interactive feature we have is our Mentee Meter. So if you have been with us before, you know that this is a great interactive tool. To access Mentee Meter, you're going to go to www.mentee.com, and then you'll enter the code, which is 89780656. Gia has also put that link and the code in the chat for you, so you can easily access that. So if you can please go ahead and go over to www.mentee.com and enter in our code for the day, which again is 89780656. Just give you a couple seconds to get over there. All right. So why don't we, as you all are kind of logging into Mentee, we are going to do kind of our introductions here. So in Mentee Meter, if you can go ahead and write your name and the organization that you are with. And if you have been with us in our trainings before, please go ahead and just add a little asterisk in front of your name, just so we know you are a return trainee with us. Great. Kashmir, Donna, Jonathan. Great. We have a lot of return. Candace, glad to see you on here. Betty, Dominique, good to see you. Charlize, Eric, Rochelle, Catrice, I think is how you say that. Apologies if I've said that wrong. Eric. Quincy, welcome. Great. So we have a lot of return trainees today, which is fantastic to see that we have kind of some overlaps from some of our previous trainings. Great. Well, thank you so much. So next up, we are going to ask that using Mentee Meter again, if you can tell us your kind of experience, what your role is with your organization. So are you a wraparound service coordinator, student support service coordinator? Are you a supervisor of one of those teams? Or are you a partner organization? So please go ahead and list the one that is closest to your role. Right, we have a lot of wraparound service coordinators, student support, supervisors. Great, we have some partners on here. That's fantastic. Awesome. Okay, great. This is good to know. We got some more partners coming in. Fantastic. Well, welcome to all of you. Welcome to our partners. I'm thinking this might be one of your first times with us, so we're excited to have you here. So we're going to use Mentee Meter again, and we're going to ask you, how long have you served in your current role? If you can share your name and how long you've been in your current role with us. Eric Thompson, 3 months, 2 weeks, welcome. 2 years, great. Candace, 2.5 years, brand new, 2 weeks. Well, welcome to our new staff members. 1 year, 1.5, 2 years. Mike's been with Hire 360 for 6 years, wow. Congratulations on that. Dominique for 2 years. Great. So it looks like we have a good range of individuals who have kind of that institutional knowledge with some of our new employees. Great. 2 months, 2 years, 12 years, 14 years. Wow. 24 years. Great. Well, great. Well, thank you all so much for sharing that with us. That's really helpful for us to know. 10 years, 3 months. Great. So let's move on to our next question. So still in Mentee Meter, I'm going to ask, is there anything in particular that you were hoping that we covered today? So if you can just put anything that you are looking for us to cover. And this can be anything related to kind of those wraparound services, student support services, open to everything that presented. Great, great. We will cover a good amount of stuff today. Delivering support services, we definitely will be talking about that. Great. IWRS, we will be touching a little bit on IWRS and you know, how to enter those services, what, you know, red flags, items like that, more information on Illinois Works version of the service integration. Okay, and definitely going to touch on that. That might be something that we have maybe a broader conversation about to make sure that we're answering that one. Okay, I'm sure. Okay, to relationships between all of the positions. Okay, we will be talking about kind of that connection between kind of our support services, where instructors kind of come into play with that. So that's definitely something we'll be touching on that. Okay, great. Well, these are all items that we'll be covering today, opening to learning throughout the training. Great, great. Well, that is a great way to go into a training. We are going to be working through a lot of topics today, so I'm excited to have you all here. Now, if you do have any comments, feedback, questions throughout the training, please feel free. You can put them in the chat, but you also can go ahead and send them to our main email address. So I'm just going to give there it is. All right, so ceo.illinoisworks@illinois.gov. So ilworks@illinois.gov. So always feel free to reach out to that email address. That is our main email. So we all kind of have access to that. You also are always free to email me as well at christine.flynn@illinois.gov. I think you guys all probably have my email at this point, but I can also share that out with you. So that kind of summarizes the end of this section. But if there are any questions before we proceed to the next section, if you can please put them in the chat now, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask if there's anything at this point that you have questions about. I'm not hearing anyone, and I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Gia, do you see anything in the chat on your end?
No, nothing in the chat on my end.
Okay, great. Well, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to pass it off back to Dr. Clark for our next section.
Thank you so much, Christine. We're moving on now to section 3, understanding your target audience. Now, by the end of this section, you will be able to articulate Illinois Works equity focus, explain the data that impacts Illinois Works construction trades, describe the Illinois Works target audience, explain how wraparound services and student support services support Illinois Works core values, list the factors that impact pre-apprenticeship participants, and leverage brainstorming as a technique to generate new or innovative ideas. Now, do you have any questions before we move on from the introduction for this particular section? Okay. The Illinois Works target audience, the focus is on 3 target populations. That will be people of color, and veterans. Women and people of color have been underrepresented in construction and the building trades. Now, even though veterans have not, traditionally been underrepresented in construction in Illinois, they are still a part of the target population per the Illinois Works Jobs Program Act. Now, as we begin to talk about Illinois Works equity focus, the Illinois Works Jobs Program Act was specifically and intentionally designed to increase equity and opportunities in capital construction jobs for underrepresented groups, including, again, people of color, women, and veterans. Equity, along with diversity, belonging, and inclusion, are the things that tie the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program's core values and requirements together. Equity focus is also one of Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program requirements for a high-quality pre-apprenticeship program that aims to significantly increase apprenticeship opportunities for historically underrepresented populations. Now, an equity focus requires the ability to demonstrate an understanding of how race, ethnicity, and gender impact individuals' access to, experience with, and ultimately their success within a construction and building trade pre-apprenticeship program. Now, there is a resource that's available for you in the Grantees Manual, which is Table 6, which is entitled Equity, What You Can Do, and it's on page 45 in the manual. Okay, Illinois Works was created as a result of Governor Pritzker's historic $45 billion capital plan and his commitment to expanding equity in Illinois construction workforce. Now, data is very important because it shows that the construction industry, as well as the trades, have not been accessible for many diverse groups, which results in fewer than 10% of apprenticeships being extended to women and minority groups in many of the higher paid trades. The Illinois Works Job Program Act was intentionally designed to increase equity and opportunity in capital construction jobs for these underrepresented populations. Now, to give you an overview of the data, take a look at this table. According to the Illinois Department of Labor in 2019, and the United States Census populations estimates of July the 1st, 2021, the following are the percent of apprentices employed in the state's construction industry by groups compared to the state and national percentages. Now, if we take a look at the table, as you can see, for women, women represent only 4% of the people that are in the construction trade, even though they make up about 50.9% of the population in Illinois and about 50.8% of the population in the nation. Now, African Americans represent 9% of the construction trade, make up 14.6% of the population in Illinois, and about 13.4% of the population in the United States. Hispanics, they represent about 18% in the construction trade. Population in Illinois, 17.5%, 18.5% in the United States. And the other races and ethnicities that other races that you see here, American Indians and Native Alaskans and Asians make up less than 1% of the people that are working in the construction trade, even though they make up in the population in the United States of more than 1%, 1.3% for American Indians and 5.9% for Asians. The Illinois Department of Labor in the United States Census Population Estimates construction industry by groups is available on page 35 in your grantee manual. Now, when we start to talk more specifically about the target audience, the goal, again, is to expand apprenticeship opportunities with a targeted focus on underrepresented populations, specifically women, people of color, and veterans. Now, an expansion of apprenticeship opportunities will not only help boost employment and wages for more Illinois residents, but will also yield significant benefits for our economy at large, since the construction sector is projected to grow by 12% in the next 10 years. Now, talking about pay and compensation, on average, jobs in this sector pay about $18 an hour to apprentices enrolled in Department of Labor registered apprenticeship programs, and about $32 an hour to those that successfully graduate and achieve journey work status. Now, investments in job training in construction industry also result in significant long-term economic impact for the state, totaling $1.2 billion. In fact, for over every dollar invested in construction job training, Illinois obtains $11 in social and economic returns. Now, as we talk about the expectations of the Illinois Works program, it is an expectation that your organization collect specific data to identify barriers that may impede target groups from gaining and retaining employment in construction and in the trades. Collecting appropriate data helps better understand how intersecting characteristics interact and create forms of exclusion and marginalization with respect to a range of program outcomes. Now, as we know, there are many complex and interconnected barriers that hinder a participant's ability to access employment opportunities. For instance, racism and sexism may intersect with an African American mother's need for childcare and transportation, which might worsen her make it worse for her to be included in the industry that's traditionally dominated by white males. Now, talking about the core values of Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program, they're rooted in 6 core values. These values are the foundation of Illinois Works programs designed and run through all stages of the pre-apprenticeship life cycle. Now, the 2 that are most pertinent for this discussion today are overcome barriers and empower for resilience and self-sufficiency. Again, the first is to overcome barriers. The foundation of Illinois Works program is ensuring equitable access and opportunities to historically underrepresented populations. Illinois Work grantees should focus on building an environment that eliminates or reduces the impact of structural barriers facing participants and celebrates cultural and ethnic and gender differences. Now, wraparound services and student support services are essential to easing those barriers for participants to join the program, to finish the program, and to have, long-term success, after completing these programs. The next core value is that to empower for resilience and self-sufficiency. Program design and implementation should focus on how participants will complete the program successfully. I want to repeat that, to complete the program successfully, but also on teaching participants long-term skills that will allow them to build resilience, become self-sufficient, and secure a long-term career. No, the wraparound services are only available during the tenure of the program. Acknowledging these needs of participants during the program can also open up conversations to their needs beyond the program. This can help participants begin to plan for how they will address those needs or barriers once they're no longer in the program, teaching them invaluable skills like long-term planning or how to access resources and services. Now, Now, grantees are not responsible for wraparound services beyond the program, but grantees may seek to help students address these issues through alternate programs or develop plans that extend beyond graduation. Additional factors that may impact Illinois Works participants include, but are not limited to, race and ethnicity biases, gender biases, negative perceptions regarding women working in the construction and building trades, knowledge regarding occupational opportunities within the construction and building trade industries, having equal access to opportunities for training, or hostile or unwelcoming workplace environment cultures. Now, using Mentee Meter, I want you to answer the following question. Now, based on your experience, what additional factors might impact the needs of your target audience? Now, I know several of you are targeting very specific audience with special needs, specific needs, like for instance, women and African Americans. Now, what specific wraparound services do you plan to offer to respond to those needs of those populations using Mentee Meter?
The question is not in there. It's saying refresh, waiting on you to put the question.
Okay.
Yep, thank
Just
you.
a
We are
second.
switching over in just a moment here. Thank you for that.
Okay. Are you able to see it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good deal. Okay, using this, let's try to answer this question. Okay, belief in the ability to succeed, housing assistance, food pantry. Great, great. Lacks of flexibility in programming prevents low-income candidates from participating. Okay, referrals for childcare, transportation, lack of resources. Okay, good, good. Nice job. Discrimination, sexism, phone bill assistance. Oh, great responses. I'm loving this. Wow. Legal aid, mental help for self and others. Yes, yes. GED attainment, legal help. These are all great responses. Okay. Wow. Thank you all so much for that. Okay, we're going to do another activity at this point. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to put you in small groups. In your small groups, I want you to answer the following questions. Identify 2 to 3 subgroups within your pre-apprenticeship cohort. Now, based on those subgroups, what specific services might each of these subgroups need to be successful? Now, you will have 10 minutes to complete the activity. Now, once you're in the group, identify an individual to summarize your conversation and share your list of services when you come back to the main room. Again, you have 10 minutes. Once you go into your breakout rooms, make sure you turn your cameras on, unmute your lines, and your 10 minutes will begin as soon as you get into your breakout rooms. Do you have any questions about the breakout room session?
Can you repeat the requirements again, please?
Okay, I'm sorry. We will put them up on the to let you see them, but I'll repeat them. Okay, once you get in your groups, you need to identify 2 or 3 subgroups that's within your pre-apprenticeship cohort. Okay, now based on those subgroups, what specific services might each of these subgroups need to be successful? You know, successful to complete the program, or successful in gaining employment or maintaining employment. So you're just going to recognize these groups that you are servicing in your programs, and then make a decision about what they may need to be successful. Are
Now,
we good?
no, I got one more question. Could
Sure.
you clarify the subgroups?
Just the groups that you are targeting in your particular program. You know, the people that will be, you know, the program participants. You know, the specific, you know, like if you're going to talk about people of color or women, or are there African American women that's in your groups? What special needs may they have? Or if you have just people of color, not necessarily women, what different needs may they have, or barriers that they may have in your program? And just discuss that as a group.
Yolanda, may I add to that?
Yes, sure.
So there could be other criteria with respect to subgroups. For example, if you're located in Central Illinois or downstate, that might be different from being in the city. So if you're inside the city limits, a bus pass might make sense. But if you are downstate or Central Illinois, where the bus service may not be as frequent, a bus pass may not necessarily meet those needs. So anything that might be a specific criteria for so there are things that the cohort as a whole will need. But then there are certain subgroups, depending on your specific population, that may have special needs. And so, for example, it could be parents. So that could be a male or female. If you have
Right.
individuals in your group that are parents, childcare might be relevant. So just start thinking about, so Dr. Clark is saying, think about what some of those subgroups are and what those specific needs might be.
Thank you so much, Jill. Do we have any more questions? Did that help explain the activity?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, you're so welcome. Do we have any more questions or concerns or anything before we go out into the breakout rooms? Okay, we're going into the breakout rooms. Okay, welcome back. I think everyone should be back from the breakout sessions. At this time, I would like to hear some of your ideas, or what was discussed during your breakout sessions.
I don't mind going first. This is Dominique Jones with Tools Up Foundation. So we had quite a few barriers to attach to different specific groups. For instance, we had Letta, she brought up the fact of single parents. So sometimes with single parents, an issue could happen with childcare, where it's in an emergency situation that could prevent them from attending the classes and courses that they need. So they have within their organization where they allow for the parents to bring in their children on an emergency basis. And they have like a small setup for childcare within their facility, which I thought was a really, really great idea for those emergency type of situations.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, so another one that we mentioned, Betty Jones, she mentioned in our group that student support services like the stipend support for full-time employees. Sometimes full-time employees that are participating in this program are going to miss out on pay if they can't make it to work for this program. So just setting up different stipends to help out with their rent and utilities and just other bill payments for those full-time employees who have to miss work to attend this their program.
Okay.
One more other thing that we mentioned was just specifically for women. So having like a mentor So for mentorship, setting it up where their mentor is a woman as well, a woman staff member, to make it more relatable so that they feel more comfortable to speak to them about their different barriers. So having that representation within the staff as mentorship is concerned is very, very important as a wraparound service and student support services. And then the last one, which was a big one, so Betty Jones mentioned like gas has gone up drastically, right? So with gas going up drastically, no one anticipated this happening. So having some type of funds set aside to help out with Ubers if they need it, or just gas assistance in some type of way. So those are the things that we came up with in our group.
Okay, thank you so much, Dominique. Those were great ideas. Good points made. Very good point, especially about the drastic increase in the gas prices.
Yes.
We never anticipated this happening. Any of the other groups, did you have anything different from what the first group discussed? Did you want to add anything to that? Or did you basically have some of the same ideas?
This is Elisa. In our group, one of the things that really was pointed out is the difference between earned and learned income, because our participants can be younger, and just helping them to understand that they have to understand that difference. In addition to the misnomers of, being on the website and internet and chat and Instagram, and thinking that income comes instantly, and it doesn't. Just helping them understand that. Also, that between that age group of 16 and 24, I think a couple of us had this issue of just helping them understand that they have to get to the program daily.
Yes, exactly.
Be aware. Being able to stay motivated for themselves, as opposed to our staffs having to, call them for the wake-up call or those type of things. So, and of course, we talked about childcare, we talked about gas care, but I'm appreciative of the reminder, Dominique, to have mentors for women as well. I heard that on the construction talk the other day. So that's a good reminder. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
thank you. Thank you, Elisa, so much. Does anyone else have anything different that they want to discuss, that they've discussed in their group?
This is group 3. I think we just, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, group 3, this is Quincy, Metropolitan Family Services. We just pretty much said the same, but I think introducing cognitive behavioral therapy with the participants, and really enforcing and reinforcing the soft skills that they learn going through job readiness training and employment preparation.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you, Quincy. Did anyone else want to?
I think in group 4, we talked a lot about ways that we can work around kind of the lack of flexibility in programming, because especially a lot of us were serving lower income candidates. My program's working on the south side of Chicago. The kind of the timer commitment of this program, combined with the low stipend, $11 an hour, wasn't meaningful in Chicago before. It only bought you 2 gallons of gas. So it's very, very challenging to keep candidates committed to the program. And I think that wraparound supports are going to be critical to covering a lot of the barriers that that are presented by that.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. Did anyone else want to add to that? Thank you all so much for participating in the breakout sessions. I mean, that's always, just a great activity for everyone. So now we're going to talk a little bit about brainstorming. Now, brainstorming is an opportunity for you to collaborate with your colleagues and team members to search for new and innovative strategies to respond to participants' needs and improve your overall program performance. Now, when you were in the breakout rooms, that was just an activity to, help you practice with brainstorming. And you all did such a fabulous job. I love that. Okay, brainstorming sources and strategies. Given the needs of your program participants, who might be appropriate to participate in brainstorming sessions to consider new and innovative strategies to provide support may include new program staff, because they often see operations from a new perspective. Because they've not yet been acclimated into the program's groupthink, this may be an opportunity to solicit new and innovative ideas. Even seasoned program staff may have observations that have generated ideas for improvement. Other Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program grantees who are leading in a particular category through the monthly Lunch and Learn series, grantees will learn about other programs, what they're doing, and what is or what is not working for them. Providers contribute to this process by effectively delivering a needed service that supports program outcomes. Partners are typically formally structured long-term relationships that work with grantees to address complex issues, to achieve shared goals. Even community stakeholders are individuals, groups, business, or organizations that have an interest or investment in a particular community. And also professional associations typically provide industry-specific practices, evidence-based practices, and evidence-informed practices that can be leveraged by a grantee. Now, do we have any questions before we proceed to the next section? You can feel free to unmute your lines or drop something in the chat. Okay? No questions? Okay. Our next section is entitled Wraparound Services. Okay? By the end of this section, you should be able to identify the location of wraparound services on the apprenticeship lifecycle, articulate the goal of wraparound services, complete a wraparound service assessment, explain how the stipend is designed to support participant success, respond to participant complex needs, and assist participants in opting in and opting out of wraparound services. The pre-apprenticeship life cycle, you probably have seen this throughout the grantee manual, because the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program requirements are organized within the pre-apprenticeship life cycle. The life cycle is outlined. It outlines the steps that participants take as they move through the pre-apprenticeship program. It tracks participants' progress from the initial program outreach to the post-transition follow-up. Now, each stage demonstrates an integral step in preparing participants to enroll in a DOL registered apprenticeship program. Wraparound services is step 4 on the pre-apprenticeship participant life cycle. Now, for those of you who attended one of some of the other webinars for the 2002 grantee manual, this graphic should be very familiar to you. Let's talk a little bit about wraparound service coordinators. Now, this person is responsible for non-academic supports beginning with the wraparound service assessment during the intake process. Now, this role will complete the assessment, set up necessary services, and work with the academic supports specialists to offer additional supports if participants begin to struggle academically if needed. Now, the wraparound service coordinator will also be a source from outside providers and partners, others for other needs for support services, and refer participants to those services. Now, you can refer to Section 6 in your grantee manual for more information on the requirements that are outlined here. Now, keep in mind, this is not a required title, wraparound service coordinator, but you must be sure the role and the responsibilities are fulfilled, okay? Now, wraparound services is one of the primary tools for fulfilling the Illinois Works core values of overcoming barriers and empowering participants for resilience and self-sufficiency. Wraparound services is support that addresses non-academic needs. And these can include an array of options. Participants must opt into a wraparound service. These services cannot be assumed or they cannot be imposed. This model of services leads to greater self-sufficiency as it challenges participants to think through a long-term planning for services. Okay, the opt-in model requires participants to meet with case managers one-on-one and establish services during the program while beginning planning to address the needs long-term. Okay, before we move any further throughout this section, I want you to just take a moment to use your imagination. Okay, just imagine from the perspective of your target audience, your program participants, there was an opportunity to receive a new car of your choice. Okay, the car is free, but it's located about 100 miles from where you're located, and you have about 4 hours to make it to the new car. Okay, hope you're following me. Someone is waiting at that location to give you the keys to this new car. But to get there to this new car, you have to use an older model car. The older car is about 15 years old. It has a manual transmission. Some people call this a standard shift. Some people call it a stick shift. The car doesn't have gas. It has one flat tire, and it's a rainy day, and the wipers don't work. Okay? Now, again, thinking about this situation from the perspective of the target audience, we're going to use Mentee Meter again. What are some things they may need to make sure they get to the next location in time to receive the free car? Now, I know several of you are targeting very specific audience with special needs. Now, based on your research about your target audience, what specific barriers might they might be faced with this situation about getting to the new car? Money, okay, that's a major one. Any more? A skilled mechanic, insurance. Oh, these are great. I hadn't even thought about the insurance yet. Mechanic, tire wipers, tow assistance, gas. Okay, driver's license. Okay, good deal. Okay, nice job, nice job. Now, some participants may be able to fix a flat tire while others may not be able to fix a flat tire. Some participants may or may not have money to buy gas or new wipers. Okay, the person's phone number to let them know where they are. Okay. Now, in this case scenario, we cannot even assume participants know how to drive. They may or may not be able to drive a standard shift with that manual transmission. Perhaps they will have to make arrangements for childcare for that 4-hour window. Now, I use this analogy to show how participants will come to the program with different needs. And Illinois Works is designed to promote equity by leveling the playing field for its participants. Wraparound services are important, but they are only impactful if they are what the participants need. Each individual is different and may have different barriers, and you have to make sure those barriers are identified to match the participant to the most appropriate wraparound services. Okay? Now, thinking back about that particular analogy, reality shapes experiences. Okay? The reality of your participants is shaped by their experiences. Now, as it relates to wraparound services and the way in which we communicate with people, we should always keep two things in mind. A person's reality is shaped by his or her experiences. Therefore, my reality is not your reality, and vice versa. Now, we should respect another person's perception or their mental model of the world. We are all unique and experience the world in different ways. Everyone is an individual and his or her own special way of being. Okay? Now, what tools are available? Can we advance the slide right here to what tools are available? People make the best decision based on what they have access to or what is available to them. Individuals can be expected to do the best they can with the tools that they have available at any given time. Going back to the car analogy, if the individual never retrieved the new car, it may be perceived that this person gave up on this opportunity to have a free car. There's a lot of judgment that can accompany this perception. Now, before the individual is judged, it's important to note this, that assessing the new car was based on the older model car, which had so many challenges. And we must keep this in mind as we're communicating with the program participants. For those of us supporting participants, it's always critical to keep this in mind. And our participants can only make the best decisions based on the resources that they have available to them at any given time. Okay? So moving ahead to the next slide about wraparound services, we're going to define wraparound services. Wraparound services are defined as supports that address non-academic needs. These can include an array of items, but some common services are childcare, which you all have pointed out, in your breakout sessions, mental health, counseling, or transportation. Participants must opt into wraparound services. This model of services, leads to greater self-sufficiency as it challenges participants to think through long-term planning for services. Now, all too often, programs provide a suite of support for participants while in the program. But when the program ends, participants are left out without the skills or knowledges of how to address those needs. Now, with this opt-in model, participants will meet with case managers one-on-one and not only establish services during the program, but begin planning for long-term plans to address these needs. Now, the goal of wraparound services. Now, in Illinois Works, the goal of these wraparound services is to create opportunities that are laser focused on minimizing or removing barriers so that participants have an equitable opportunity to complete pre-apprenticeship training and transition to registered apprenticeship programs and employment. Okay, using, Mentee Meter again, what wraparound services will your program offer? Again, I know that you are targeting very specific audience. So what are some of those services that your program in particular are offering to your participants? Again, what wraparound services will your program offer? Are you able to see the Mentee Meter that's up right now? Okay, mentorship, childcare, counseling. Okay, nice job. Housing assistance, right? Recovery services. These are great responses. Case management, driver's license resources. Okay. Nice job. Stipend, food stamps, gas card. Again, mental health support. Okay, these are great answers. Okay, thank you so much for your participation in that. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the wraparound service assessment. Now we're going to take a deeper dive into each of the wraparound services and the required assessment. Now the Illinois Works reporting system wraparound service assessment must be completed with each participant as a part of the intake process. Now, the Illinois Works Reporting System Partner Guide can provide you with instructions on how to actually complete the assessment. Keep in mind that the staff's role is not to offer or not to assign services. Participants must opt in to these services. This assessment is completed during the intake process. However, participants' needs may change throughout the program. You know, a participant may need something completely different than he or she needed when they entered the program. They may need something different in the middle of the program or even at the end of the program. As a result of participants, they can opt in or opt out of wraparound services at any point during their active enrollment in the program. Okay, now we're about to put this slide up that lists these different wraparound services that include apprenticeship, transportation, childcare, and things of that nature. Now, is there anything on this list that you would like to discuss in detail? I mean, I'm quite sure you're familiar with these particular wraparound services. They're laser focused, again, so that the participants have equitable opportunities to complete the pre-apprenticeship training. Would you like me to discuss these in detail? Or do you have any specific questions about any of the particular wraparound services? You know, the apprenticeship application fees, the transportation costs, childcare. But always keep in mind that we need to be very strategic about how we ask questions or these guiding questions, and don't assume that, you know, the participants understand, you know, what these particular wraparound services mean. Is someone asking a question? I'm sorry. Okay, I thought someone was asking a question. I'm sorry. Well, like I was saying, just not assuming that they understand the definition of these wraparound services. We need to be careful when we're introducing them to the services. The manual does provide like guiding questions for each of the services. And let's just be careful about how we're asking the questions when we're trying to assess and determine the wraparound services or the barriers for these particular participants. Now, let's talk a little bit about performance-based stipends, if you don't have any questions about these particular wraparound services. Now, you are required by Illinois Works Job Program Act to provide stipends to all participants for instructional hours. You will notice that stipends are not considered a wraparound service because all participants are required to receive a stipend. However, we talk about them in relation to wraparound services because they serve a similar purpose of reducing barriers and empowering self-sufficiency. Now, participants do not have to opt in to the stipend. Stipends are payments made to a pre-apprenticeship program participant for living expenses and are designed to ensure that participants can maintain financial solvency throughout the tenure of the program. All grantees must comply with the Illinois Works Performance-Based Stipend Policy, and there's a copy of that policy, and it can be found in the appendix of the grantee manual. Now, if your policy meets or exceeds Illinois Works policy, you may maintain your own policy. But keep in mind, if you choose to implement an alternate policy, it must be submitted to Illinois Works for approval. All stipend policies must include the following items. Grantees must provide stipends up to $11 per instructional hour. Instructional hours are defined as training time spent in a classroom, construction lab, or doing worksite practicums. Stipend amounts must be the same for all instructional activities. Stipends may not be paid out for hours spent on wraparound services, student support services, transition services, or doing follow-up. Stipends can only be provided to participants. Participants must be actively enrolled in the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Training Program, and stipends must be reduced if participants do not meet or exceed attendance and performance measures. Now, keep in mind that participants are required to maintain an attendance of 80% or higher and score 70% or higher on module post-assessments. Not meeting these thresholds should result in a percentage-based reduction in these stipends. Now, a stipend versus a wage. Now, stipends are framed as an hourly rate. The policies are based solely on attendance will not be approved. Okay, it is important to remember that stipends are not a wage and program participants are not employees. To receive a stipend, the training must be predominantly for the benefit of the pre-apprentice and cannot be connected to a job at the end of a training, nor can pre-apprentices displace regular employees. Do not use wage or wage equivalent language in your program materials or with program participants. Okay, the template for the performance-based stipend policy is available in the appendix of the grantee manual. Also, we have a table that's in the grantee manual, participant barrier examples in Illinois Works allowable costs to assist in overcoming barriers. It's also found, like I say, in the grantee manual. I can't remember what page it's on, but it's in section 6. Table 11 is also in the grantee manual, and it's on page 86 in the 2022 grantee manual. Okay, again, using Mentee Meter, another activity. What partnerships have you established to help provide wraparound services? Okay. Can we all see the Mentee Meter? Other CBOs, okay. Anyone else? Oh, wow, connections with daycares, okay. Mental health, great. Anyone else? Food pantries, oh, okay. Clothing, these are all great. All great. Okay, nice job. Okay, when we're thinking about these services and about these partnerships, we start getting into like thinking about the complex needs. Some populations may experience specific challenges that require support beyond Illinois Works scope of services. And because these groups may be identified as having more complex needs within the Illinois Works system, they should be provided with resources and information about programs and agencies that can assist in addressing their specific barriers. Again, okay, using Mentee Meter. Okay, during a previous activity, you identified subgroups within your participant cohort that might need wraparound services. Given the definition of complex needs, are there individuals that might have complex needs? Explain your response. I just love Mentee Meter. I mean, it's so engaging, gives us an opportunity to just hear from you and have you engaged. Oh, well, undocumented members. Good answer. Good response. Legal assistance for driver's license. Okay. Those re-entering society after serving time. Felony record. Okay. Legal assistance. Yeah, that's a big one. Homeless veteran. Okay. Nice job. Drug use. Okay. Okay. Criminal records, drug use, legal assistance, driver's license, elderly care. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your responses. As we talk about barriers for specific groups and specific populations, individuals with more complex needs should be provided with resources and information about programs and agencies that can assist in addressing their specific barriers. Now, the grantee manual provides specific information regarding challenges for groups and populations. Like I say, all of this information is in the grantee manual, and on page 87, there's a table that discusses barriers for specific groups and populations in the manual. Now we'll talk about opting in and out of wraparound services. Okay. Now, Illinois Works views impactful wraparound services as central to the participant's success. As discussed earlier, the services are only impactful if they are what the participants need to be successful. Now, be sure that Illinois Works reporting system wraparound service assessment is comprehensively completed with each participant. Assessing participant needs requires cultivating relationship with participants and active listening, which will be discussed later during this session. I think Christine will discuss that with you about cultivating relationships and active listening. Now, assessing needs is an ongoing process because, like I said before, participants' needs may change as they move through the program. What they need in the beginning, they might not need in the end, or they might not need in the middle. Now, for example, a participant may enter the program during a time of year when children are in school, but during the summer months, the participant may need child care assistance. They don't need this assistance during the school year because the children are in school. Now, participants can opt in and out of services throughout their tenure in the program. Each time a new wraparound service assessment should be completed in the Illinois Works reporting system. Okay. Now, do we have any questions? I know there was a lot of information. Do we have any questions before we proceed to the next section? You can unmute your line, or you can drop a question in the chat. Anyone? Gia, Christine, do you see any questions in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat, and we could probably move into a break, Yolanda, if that works for you.
Okay, sounds great. We'll give you about 5 minutes for a break, and that means I have 11:27, so we should be back in about 5 minutes and start with the next section. Okay? Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you all for returning. We are going to head into our next section, which is student support services. So Yolanda just spent time talking about those non-academic needs. So now we are shifting gears into our academic needs. So by the end of this section, you will all be able to identify the location of student support services on the pre-apprentice life cycle, describe the role of student support services, determine the necessary support for your participant population, respond to student support alerts in IWRS, and comply with ADA requirements. So let's go ahead and get started. So as Yolanda said, this graphic will be very familiar to any of you who attended the grantee manual sessions 1, 2, or 3. This is our pre-apprentice life cycle. So this guides the entire Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program from that kind of first outreach and recruitment all the way through that post-transition follow-up. So what we're going to be talking about is those student support services. So that's our 5th step in our pre-apprentice life cycle. And each of these steps is essential to having your participants move through your program and reach kind of that ultimate primary goal of transitioning into that DOL registered apprenticeship program. So we're going to start by talking about our student support services coordinator. So similar to the wraparound services coordinator position, this title is not mandatory. We are just kind of categorizing the responsibilities of this individual into a single role. So you might share this amongst several different staff members. This might be someone you share responsibility with a partner. But this coordinator position is really meant to specifically implement those student support services. So that's participant progress reports, monitoring those missed hours sessions. If there is an action plan that needs to be set up to help an individual kind of get back on track, that's the role of this individual. And so you can kind of read more about student services and student support services in general and this role in the grantee manual. So if you refer to section 6, the student support services section starts on page 90 in that section. So please refer there. So let's kind of delve into student support services overall. So while participants can opt into services as far as wraparound services and some of our student support services, there are some student support services that are required and they cannot opt out of. So those are going to be triggered by not meeting the attendance requirements or not meeting those post-assessment requirements. So if you have individuals who fall below those thresholds, either on attendance or your post-assessments, there are required student support services that your student support service coordinator is going to implement with those students. So this tailored academic support meets participants' needs with the goal of maximizing their ability to be academically successful in the program and obtain the offered credentials and certifications. So these supports can include tutoring, retesting, makeup sessions, among others. So those are just kind of examples of some of the services that kind of fall in these categories that we see most often. So let's jump over to a Mentee Meter question. So what academic needs might your target audience have that may require additional support? So again, this is building off of that target audience. You know, there are going to be needs that your audience has that maybe others don't. So really think about your target audience. What are those kind of additional supports that they might need from an academic perspective? So it looks like the question is up now. I'll give you all a minute just to add in your responses here. Tutor, IEP, absolutely. Translation, huge one. Tutoring, math tutoring. Math tutoring is big. Apprenticeship test tutoring, absolutely. I'm glad to see such an emphasis on tutoring. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, and it's exceptionally important. GED, study skills review, great. Communication skills, absolutely. Absolutely. Great, great. Math prep, awesome. Okay, great. So all of these are absolutely on point. These are great services that you guys are going to offer. I'm glad that you kind of are offering these already or plan to offer these. We have more coming in here. ESL tutoring, very important. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing those. And we will head into our next question. So still using Mentee Meter, we will, Gia will refresh our question here. And then we want to know, what student support services will your program offer? So we know that your organization might offer several different services, but for the Illinois Works program, what are those support services you're planning to offer your participants? So some of those might be repeats of the last one. So it might be that math tutoring, absolutely. That was not planned, but I'm glad that came up when it did. Mentorship, great. Regular tutoring support, tutoring, awesome, awesome. Case management, resource attainment, coaching, great. These are all great. For adult learners, refresh on memorization and study habits, absolutely, absolutely. That is going to be a big one for individuals who maybe haven't been in training or an education setting in a long time. You know, study habits, being able to build up those skills when we're in school consistently, those feel very natural. But once we have kind of that distance from an educational setting, we kind of start to lose those study habit skills, those note-taking skills, memorization. So these are great. Literacy support, aptitude tests, tutoring with CPS teachers, soft skills. Awesome. These are all great. Thank you so much for sharing these. Great. So, you all kind of touched on these fantastic services that you are planning to offer, that you've offered in the past, perhaps, or you're partnering with some individuals, other organizations to offer. And so these are all really addressing kind of those academic barriers. And so, I'll say this a million times because we really like to hit it home that those wraparound services are your non-academic. These are your academic, your student support services. And so I'm going to refer you to table 13. So that's in the grantee manual, and that is on page 91. And in this table, what you're going to find is a list of potential academically focused barriers. So these are things that your target population may experience, they may not experience, but these are some that, in kind of the experience of adult education are kind of most prominent. And so these are things like low literacy rates. These are things like struggling to make it to class on time. So you have missed sessions, missed hours. And so in that table, you'll see kind of those examples of those barriers, a little description of those, and then examples of what services might address those barriers. So these are things like, as you've written here, tutoring, extremely important if you start to see individuals that have low literacy rates, are struggling with their mathematics. Missed sessions, those are going to be really important for individuals who aren't able to, get to class. They have to miss class or they just show up late, whatever that looks like. If you have individuals struggling to pass post assessments, you might be looking for, tutoring focused on whatever that instructional material is. So these are all really important. We just give you some examples in that table. Again, that's on page 91. So please feel free to go through those and kind of think about which ones you are seeing with your target population, if there's any that are in there that kind of give you some ideas about support services that you can implement, or maybe partners to seek out. So because tutoring is exceptionally important, and obviously you all know the value of it, we're going to move on to our next slide, which is tutoring best practices. So I don't know if we can get back to the PowerPoint. I'm guessing Gia is working on that. So while Gia is pulling that up, oh, there we go. Perfect timing. All right, so tutoring best practices. So it seems like many of you are already utilizing tutoring. You know the value of tutoring. So this is just kind of a quick list as kind of a refresher for those who are doing tutoring, but for those who maybe don't have an established tutoring part of your program, here are kind of best practices that you really want to think about. So tutoring it's really important to kind of have that structure around it. It's not kind of this one-off instance that, you know, someone asks for help and then you help them on a specific task. That absolutely is necessary, but tutoring is kind of a longer term situation. So you're really creating a plan, you're documenting what those milestones are, you're ensuring that the resources that are given to the student are tailored to what they need. And then you're doing kind of that regular follow-up. So how are they progressing? Are they actually getting better on the post assessments? Are there other areas that they might need assistance with that maybe haven't quite come up yet because of a post assessment, but they're not feeling confident in, and tutoring can really help them kind of just go to that next level with it. So those are some of our kind of best practices. So now we'll talk about tutoring, tutors in general. So tutors are instructors. And so for your programs, it might literally be your instructor who is your tutor, right? It might be if someone is struggling with a construction skill, that your instructor steps in and spends a little bit of time after class or comes in before class, really makes that dedicated effort to meet with them one-on-one. But your tutor might also be a partner. So I know we have several partners on the call today that are helping to support our participants in the Illinois Works program and supporting our organizations. And so the role of the tutor here is really to ensure that we have the same expectations of our tutors, regardless of whether they're our instructors or a partner or someone else. We have that same expectation of these tutors as we do of our instructors. So, you know, we have this list here. This is from the Indeed editorial team. And they just kind of remind us, what are these things that we're looking for when we're looking for a tutor? So this is someone who's going to have patience, they're positive, they're empathetic, they have that technical knowledge. So while that might not seem like something we have to say, that's absolutely something that you need to be evaluating with your tutors. Do they know the topic area? Are they a subject matter expert? The communication skills, leadership, you know, these are the skills that we see with our tutors, but we also want to see with our instructors. We also want to see as part of this Illinois Works culture is just ensuring that we are showing up for our students or our participants, excuse me, in these ways, and that they feel that we're being patient with them. They feel that we're being positive with them, that we understand where they're coming from, because it's within that understanding and that alignment with them that we can actually really provide the support that they need to be successful in this space. So let's now move on. So student support alerts and tracking. So I know in our previous Mentee Meter question, we asked, what are you looking to learn in this session? One of the items that was brought up was IWRS, how things are, documented in IWRS. And student support alerts and tracking is a big part of what you will be doing in IWRS with your participant. So this is probably going to be the area that you spend the most time on when you're in IWRS, because this is where you are going to be tracking attendance. This is where you're going to be tracking assessment scores. And so I just wanted to kind of spend a little bit of time going through this. Because you noted earlier that you want more information about IWRS, I went ahead and I looked up, if you go to our Illinois WorkNet, our Illinois Works Partner Guide, and you go to the video tutorials, if you go to IWRS session number 2, so that was on February 3rd, both the video and the PowerPoint are available there. And that walks you through how to enter attendance, that walks you through how to enter your assessment scores. It has a whole host of kind of how to navigate IWRS with these specific services. So please feel free to check that out. It will give you a lot of information about kind of what our expectations are, what the system looks like. And then, of course, you know, I'm always a resource if you have any questions and need to kind of have a one-on-one walkthrough. But just as a reminder, so our attendance expectations is that students have an 80% or above attendance rate. And then our assessment scores are a 70% or above. So again, attendance 80% above, assessment scores 70% or above. And so why these are important is that when you are tracking these in the system, if an individual, if one of your participants falls below one of these thresholds, so they fall below 80% attendance, they fall below 70% post-assessment scores, that is going to trigger in our system a red flag. So I just want to note that because you will see this, if you are entering these items, you will see that if someone drops below one of those thresholds, their profile will flag for you. Now, there are some modules like OSHA 10 that require higher levels of attendance. So those attendance requirements are not an Illinois Works attendance requirement. They are a requirement of that certification. But if they fall below the OSHA 10 100% attendance requirement, they cannot reach that credential. So I just want to make that distinction because while our program has an 80% attendance threshold, OSHA 10 has a 100% attendance threshold. So as you are working with your participants, it's really important to kind of express that distinction. So let's move on now. So as I mentioned, you're going to have these red flags show up if a participant falls below these thresholds. So that is the only way that they're going to get that red flag is if they have lower attendance or lower post-assessments. But just because they fall below those thresholds, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an academic need, correct? So if someone's struggling with attendance, if someone's struggling to get to class, that might be an academic need. They might not feel confident in their academics. They might need additional assistance and they're kind of avoiding coming to try to get out of, you know, something that they don't feel comfortable in. But it might also be a non-academic need. It might be they're struggling with transportation and they weren't at the beginning of the program. It might be, you know, a childcare center closed because, you know, it's a holiday or something like that. So you suddenly start to see these academic and non-academic needs showing up in the classroom. So when you have these red flags, they're not meant to be punitive. They're not meant to be something that says this person has done something wrong and there needs to be some sort of punishment. They really are red flags to say there is something happening here and this individual needs additional support. And so what we do when we see a red flag, and if we can move on to that next slide, Gia, great. So what happens when we trigger a red flag is that the student support services coordinator takes that as a cue to set up a meeting with that participant. And this meeting is really meant to kind of dig into what that red flag means. right? So it's asking, is this an academic need? Is this a non-academic need? Does this individual need tutoring? Does this individual need additional wraparound service supports? It's building out this understanding of what does that red flag mean? Because at that point, you just have the notice. You don't know what the root cause of the issue is. So it's during this meeting that the Student Support Services Coordinator is going to develop what we call an action plan. So this action plan is meant to create different steps that allow the participant to get back on track. And that action plan can be as simple as they need to make up 3 hours because that caused them to fall below the attendance threshold. That could be tutoring. That could be both of those, and also they need additional childcare support or additional transportation support. So this is, as someone kind of asked, how do these roles integrate? This is a place where that wraparound service coordinator and that student support services coordinator really integrate. Because if you're finding that students are struggling in the classroom, it could be academic, it could be non-academic, it could be both. So this is where they're really working together. So now in that action plan, you're going to set that up in IWRS. So many of you have already gone through the process of setting up your services, maybe attaching wraparound services to your participant profiles. This is going to be the same way that you attach those services to your participant profile. So if an individual needs a tutoring service, you're going to go to that participant's profile and you're going to choose tutoring and attach that to their participant profile. So again, this is not a technical presentation, but that is explained in the IWRS session 2 from February 3rd. So please go ahead and take a look at that. And that has more technical kind of directions for you. But it's going to be the exact same process. You're just going to add in those student support services, and that will create that action plan. Now, if you do find there is a non-academic need, you will need to kind of meet with that wraparound service coordinator, and that might trigger a new wraparound service assessment, but only if that individual is going to be adding in a new service. So if they have an existing service and they just need to expand it, so perhaps at the moment that you meet with them, they have childcare services for 2 days a week, and now they need it for 4 days a week. That expansion will not trigger a new assessment, but if you're adding a brand new service, that will trigger an assessment. So I just want to make that clear. If there are any questions about that point of when you need to do that new wraparound service assessment?
Christine, there are actually a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm sorry I missed those. Please.
No, they're just popping up here.
Okay, great.
So the first one, it says, where is registration in the work plan on this life cycle? So this occurred a little bit earlier, but it's inquiring about registration. And I can go, if it'll help, I can go back to the life cycle for purposes of clarifying this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm guessing the question around registration is focused on actually registering for the program in general. So that happens in the application process. So that's step number 2. So we refer to kind of registration as enrollment. So part of that application process is once they go through the application, they'll do their interview. And then at that point, that's when you decide, is this an individual we want to extend an acceptance letter to? And if so, then they accept that they want to be part of the program. That's when they would enroll. So we call it enrollment. Some people call it registration, but that's where that would happen.
Okay, and then it seems like a follow-up to this question. Does enrollment end after wraparound or after support service benchmarks in the life cycle? And this is from Sandy.
Absolutely. So enrollment actually ends before those services. So you will enroll your participants, and then they'll go through that intake process. And in that intake process, that's where those wraparound services take place. So that's where you'll do your wraparound service assessment, is in that intake point. And then that's when, after you kind of do intake, that's when your training begins. That's when you're starting to record your attendance. And so once you start to record that attendance, that's where these student support services come in. So your student support services are, the bulk of them are really going to happen once you get into that training period. Did that answer the question, Sandy? Just want to make sure. Is it Ian, Sandy? Okay. Not hearing from him. I don't know if you see anything in the chat, Gia. I just want to make sure I answered that question.
There's nothing. Yes. So the comment was, yes, that provided the appropriate explanation.
Okay.
But there is follow-up here.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so how much of this is going to be tracked by DCEO, and what does that tracking look like?
Yeah, so Mike, are you asking how much the student support services are going to be tracked, or what are you asking? If you can just unmute and let me know, Mike, that would be helpful. Oh, with the red flags. Okay. So with red flags, we are going to be looking at them on your dashboards. So on a weekly basis, I will be reviewing each of your dashboards, which kind of outlines how many inquiries you have, how many enrollees you have, how many red flags you have. And then I'll be touching base with you just to kind of identify what those red flags are about. So if I do see someone who's kind of consistently has a red flag week to week, I'll reach out to you and kind of try to understand more about what's going on with that individual. But it's not going to be something where I'm looking at it on a daily basis and reaching out to you, just kind of those longer term trends if someone seems to kind of consistently be on that list for your program. Did that answer your question, Mike? Yeah. Okay, great. All right, so let's delve back in. So kind of following up on those red flags. So, and Mike's question actually was a really good lead into this, because while you can trigger red flags, you also can remove those red flags. So when I'm talking about, I'm going to be looking at dashboards, I'm going to be kind of following up to see if people are kind of consistently on those lists. What I'm going to be following up on is, is this someone that their red flag just hasn't been removed, but they do have an action plan, you guys are working with them? Or is it that, you haven't been able to meet with them yet? And how can we kind of work together to ensure that that person is getting the support that they need? So let's, our kind of next section is going to be talking about identifying and kind of removing those red flags. But before we jump to that, I just want to share 2 templates with you, because these are important samples. If you have policies like this already, feel free to use your own policies. We don't really have restrictions about what you do with these kind of extenuating circumstances policies for makeup assessments. So this is kind of like an absence policy. Do you have, that has to be excused or not excused? Do you have a certain number of absences that then, results in some sort of like disciplinary action in your program? Again, we don't have requirements around those. But if you want to create a policy, please do. Please feel free to use this template. If you want to either use it straight out, you can modify it. It's up to you. So this is template 14. You can find that in the appendix of your grantee manual, or you can find it on the Illinois Works Partner Guide. And then the same with template 15. So these sample makeup sessions and post-assessment policy. So similarly, feel free to utilize it as it is now. Feel free to modify it, or if you have your own, you can use your own. But these are really just meant to give your participants an understanding of, if they do miss a class, if they do fall below those thresholds, what is the response? What can they expect? And it just kind of gives you that leg to stand on to ensure that you are doing this in a consistent manner with all of your participants. So like I said, this is also in the appendix, and it's also in the Illinois Works Partner Guide. You can download it from that resource section. Thank you, Gia. So we've talked a lot about kind of what services you all are going to be providing perhaps in-house. But we also know that some of you are going to be relying on partners. We have partners on the call today. So if you can jump over to Mentee Meter and just answer, what partnerships have you established right now that will be helping to provide these student support services, if any? Right. So what partnerships have you established to help provide student support services? So I know some of you will be doing these internally, but if you do, if there are individuals who are utilizing partners, please throw them in the Mentee Meter box now. We'd love to kind of know what partnerships you have established. So this might be Tutoring Services, Literacy Chicago. It's a fantastic organization. Great. And that's really a big one that we often kind of underestimate is the level of literacy that is in our communities. Often there's a belief that, because education rates are higher than they have been in history, that we have a higher literacy rate. But what's often not talked about is that, especially here in the Chicago area, if you're outside of Chicago, might be a little different. But when we look at kind of the average CPS graduate, that reading rate is much lower than would be that you would expect a senior in high school. And so when we have individuals coming into our programs with those lower literacy rates, they really do need that kind of extra support. So local community college, it's a great partnership. Re-entry support, homeless veterans, daycare, financial literacy, homeless prevention, Roseland Franklin University, great. Working on partnerships, great. And that's important to note as well, is we don't expect these to be established at this moment. So if you are still working on those partnerships, and you will probably continue to work on those partnerships as you learn more about your target population, as you have individuals come in with different needs that you haven't had before, that's when those partnerships are going to start to kind of grow from your program. Communities and school social workers, always a great resources, social workers. ESL support, great. Well, thank you for all of these. And like I said, partnerships are something that are ongoing. And so we expect that those will continue to grow as you move through your program. All right. So the final slide for this section is ADA requirements. So Illinois Works programs are ethically and legally responsible for adhering to ADA requirements. So as you likely all know, ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in multiple areas. And so that includes employment, transportation, public accommodations, education, communications, and then access to state and local programs, local government programs and services. So we obviously fall within that category. We are a training program. We are a state service funded by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So we require that all of our grantees do comply with ADA requirements. So each program must have a designated ADA coordinator, provide public notice that there is not, that you are compliant with ADA requirements, that you do not discriminate based on disability, have an established grievance policy, conduct a self-evaluation, and develop a transition plan regarding accessibility. So if you have questions specifically about this, please feel free to reach out to me and we can kind of delve in a little bit deeper for your specific organization. But this is something that we're going to be checking on during our kind of annual audits. This is not something that you need to upload into IWRS or anything like that, but we do want you to kind of have information on file, your policy on file, and ensure that you are complying with these requirements. So that completes this section. So are there any questions about student support services that I can address before we move on? So please feel free now, unmute yourself if you would like, or you can throw a question in the chat.
Yep, there are no questions in the chat.
Okay, all right, great. Well, like I said, please feel free if you have a question later on, please put it in the chat, or you can always reach out to us. Our email is ceo.ilworks@illinois.gov. So we will move on to our next section. So we have spent kind of the bulk of our presentation so far really reiterating what our expectations at Illinois Works are, what we're looking for as far as wraparound services and student support services. This next section is really going to focus on, once you meet those requirements, what does it look like on the ground to provide these? How do we effectively provide these services? And effectively doesn't just mean that we kind of establish them and do a referral, but how are we cultivating these relationships so that individuals feel comfortable disclosing if they have a need? You know, I think that we all can understand that sometimes it's hard to ask for assistance. Sometimes it's hard to admit that you need help. And our participants are no different. And so it's important that we're building kind of these connections with our participants so that they feel that they can trust us. They feel that we have their best interest at heart, that we're not going to be sharing their information with other people. And so that's what this next section is really going to hit on. So this is building rapport and connections. And by the end of this section, you will be able to explain the importance of rapport building with participants, employ rapport building best practices, practice active listening, cultivate relationships with participants, explain the impact of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and describe the role of intrinsic motivation. So let's get started. So we are going to kick off this section. I'm going to ask for a little assistance from Dr. Gia, because this section is really going to talk about what it means to start building that trust. What are some strategies and tools that we can utilize to start building this rapport, to start cultivating our relationships? So I'm going to ask Dr. Gia to share a very impactful story that she shared with us a couple of weeks ago. You don't mind. Thank you so much, Dr. Gia.
I do not mind at all. What I appreciate about this is that in our kind of instructional guide that we put together, my name was put in. I deleted it out. And Christina's like, no, share the story. So I'm actually happy to share the story. When we began talking about the impact of rapport building, we actually just started sharing stories among ourselves. So we didn't want this just to be kind of an academic conversation, but to talk about, based on our experiences, what has really happened in the field. And when we were able to develop rapport, what was the outcome of that? So what were some of the things that occurred that that we felt good about just in our own professional experiences, but was evidence that building rapport really makes a difference, a real world difference with participants. So I got recruited by both Christine and Yolanda, for that matter, to share my story. I will say we all had really impactful stories, which to me just says that this is the opportunity to build rapport, to make a difference, is something that we all can do. And I think the fact that you all are in this room right now is evidence of that. And I know that you all actually will have similar stories. So my story actually went way back several decades to my first job out of undergrad. And I worked in a CPS, a Chicago public health clinic. And a woman would come in to visit, and before I would make a referral to the nurse, for services. I would typically do an assessment, and she and I just happened to have connected. And one of the reasons that she was not getting all of the care that she needed is because she didn't have insurance. And the reason why she didn't have insurance is because she wasn't gainfully employed. And the reason why she wasn't gainfully employed is because she didn't have a high school diploma. And so every time she would come in, we would talk, chat, and we made a personal connection. And so one time when she came in, I just asked her, we keep having there's this same cycle that we continue to talk about. How about you get your GED? And so she's like, I've been thinking about it, and I think I want to do it. I should probably go register. So it was something that I've been kind of floating around in the back of her mind. And so I just said, you know what? What are you doing? What are you doing Thursday? Meet me here in the morning and let's just go. Now I will admit this was slightly out of scope for my role, but I figured I'd apologize later instead of ask permission. And she showed up on Thursday, and we drove down to the junior college that was closest to her. And she registered for her GED. Now, it wasn't quite that easy. We got there and she's like, oh, I don't have all the proper ID. I was like, get back in the car, let's go. We went and picked up the ID. We went back to the office. I double parked, drove around, waited for her to come out. When she came out, we talked about, well, what do you need? Do you need books? Do you need paper? Like, what do you need? We went and picked up whatever she needed for the program. And then shortly after we did all of that, I got accepted into graduate school, and needed to relocate to Springfield. So I left. And about a year or so later, I just called up because I'd kept in contact with some of my colleagues from that first job. So I had called up just to say hi, and I was going to be in town, and who was there? Can we go grab lunch? And they were like, we have messages for you. So I'm not supposed to have messages. All of my work have been transitioned to someone else. So there should not have been messages available for me. And I'm like, how can that be so? Like, such and such should have gotten those messages. And she said, yeah, but she said she specifically needed to talk to you. So we've been collecting these messages for you. And she started to read the messages. Hi, Gia. I just want, and of course, they can't give out employment information. So they couldn't tell her she's no longer here. She left. So they just kept collecting the messages. Hi, Gia. I just want to let you know I went to my first day of class. Hi, Gia. I got to tell you, this math is killing me, but I'm trying to hang in there. Hi, Gia. I really wish you'd call me back. You won't believe this. I passed the math section. And all the way until the last one that she, shared, I wish I could tell you this in person. I hope you're getting my messages, but I just earned my GED. And so that's one of the stories, for whatever that imposition was that day, let's go, we're going down to the GED office. We're going to the junior college. We're going to work this out. But that, to have had that last message read to me, whatever that moment was, it paled in comparison to having her read that last message. So that was the story that I shared.
Thank you, Gia. I love that story because it really exemplifies not only what our participants are working towards, the impact that this program, your program, will have on these individuals and helping them achieve these certifications, helping them kind of start these careers, but it also really exemplifies the importance of having that support staff, the importance of having every single person on this call show up for our participants and provide those wraparound services, provide those support services, provide those referrals. Because without that kind of support, we don't have outcomes like the one that Gia just shared. We don't have outcomes like the ones that are going to be produced in this program. And so it's just so important to connect in that way and really share those stories, not only with each other, but also with our participants, because it's that act of storytelling really builds that familiarity. I think everyone on this call probably has had a moment where they have had an experience like that, where they've had someone come to them and say, this is the thing that I was able to do because you helped me. This is the impact that you made. And maybe it didn't seem like a big deal when you made that choice, or when you decided to drive them to get their GED or whatever that was, but it really changes their trajectory. And it's because of the people like you sitting on this call that they're able to do that. And so that storytelling is one way to build rapport. It's telling them, this is someone like you who was able to move forward, who was able to achieve this. And as soon as you hear that someone like you has done that, that door becomes open to you. So I want to jump into an activity. So we're going to go back into our breakout rooms. And I want you to share with each other, with your group, a story that had an impact for you. What is a participant, who is a participant that you remember? What is the time that you did something that, maybe you didn't think it was a big deal at the moment, or it might have inconvenienced you a little bit, but then the result just made that completely go away because the impact that you had really helped to kind of motivate you more. Maybe it's a story you used with your participants, of a success story of one of your other participants. So I'm going to put you back into your breakout sessions. You're going to have 10 minutes to kind of talk amongst yourselves, and then we'll return back to the main group, and hopefully we can get some of you to share some of the impactful stories that you shared in your small groups. So let me go ahead and send you all to your breakout rooms here. All right, so you are going to be on your way in just a moment here. All right, well, welcome back. I hope you all had some great stories to share. And I'm hoping that if someone would please be willing to unmute and share either your story or a story that one of your fellow session members brought up. So is there anyone who would like to share?
This is Elisa. I'm actually just going to give you a snapshot of each one of the stories. It's really quick. We had a great story about a reentry of a person entering into society again and had a movement into a career that changed their life completely. We had a self-esteem story about a young man getting a haircut. His self-esteem went from 0 to 1 million because he was likened to DJ Talent. And then we had another story of a homeless girl who was a part of the program, became emancipated, and then eventually was followed up on by our partner in the class, in our session, and she is now in construction management. Amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing those. Can we get one more person to share from your session? Anyone else would like to share a story? Okay. Well, if no one else would like to share, if those stories that Elisa just shared are representative of all of your breakout sessions, I'm sure, because the work that we all do with these participants, it really is supporting them. It's really meeting someone where they are and helping them to transform kind of their lives. And that's exceptionally important. And those really are the stakes that we have in these programs. Is these aren't just, we get someone a training and we check off that they now have a certification. You all really are changing the trajectory of not only these individuals' lives, but the lives of future generations, right? Because as soon as someone in your family, as soon as your parent, as soon as a friend opens up this opportunity and they're moving forward, it becomes possible for everyone else. This idea of something you didn't think was possible before, you didn't think was an opportunity before, suddenly becomes that for you. And it's through your assistance that this is working. So I want to just spend a little bit more time kind of talking about kind of that rapport building. So we'll kind of move on to the next slide here, talking about why building rapport is important. So all of you kind of demonstrated this through your stories. Storytelling is a strategy that you can use, and building that rapport, it starts to build that trust. It starts to build that connection with someone, and they're much more likely to open up to you. They're much more likely to share something that they wouldn't have shared with you before. It ensures that we're building a culture of belonging, inclusion, collaboration. And it's when that we start to build that trust that we also allow them to start to lean on us a little bit more, right? And so that helps them to get through this career transition that maybe before they didn't think that they could do, or without the support they didn't think was possible. So I want to kind of jump down to Gia, if we can go to rapport building best practices. And these are just kind of a list of ways that you can start to build rapport with your participants. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it just shows that building rapport doesn't have to be kind of large gestures. It's ensuring that we're remembering participants' names. We're not mispronouncing them. We're not calling them, a variation of their name if they have asked us, to call us something else. It's being prepared for those interactions, finding common experiences. So sharing these stories will really help to locate those experiences and connect you. Actively listen and be aware of our body language. So being aware of, are we actually looking at them when we're speaking to them? Are we, ensuring that we are making eye contact with them? Because that body language can really determine if someone thinks that you're invested in the conversation or not. So I want to delve deeper into active listening in particular, because this is one that I think that we all know that we need to listen when we're talking to someone. But when we actively listen, it's really kind of ensuring that that individual not only understands that we are fully mentally and physically present, but also that we care about what they're talking about. So when we're thinking about active listening, here are just a couple of tips on how we can ensure that we are proactively communicating. So the first is putting electronics away. So I know that we all have a lot to do, and we constantly have kind of devices beeping and going off. But really putting those away ensures that our participants know that we're present with them, especially mentally present. So this includes, closing your laptops, turning away from your monitor, verbally clarify your understanding. So if you have a participant say something to you, don't repeat exactly back to them, but you can say, I think what I'm hearing is, and then continue on and give your impression. Because one, that gives them the opportunity to say, well, that's not really what I meant, or that's exactly what I meant. And it shows them that you actually were listening and engaged in what they were talking about. The next one is asking open-ended questions. So as we probably all do just naturally, if we're trying to start a conversation with someone, we don't ask a yes or no question. Yes or no questions kind of end the conversation, whereas an open-ended question invites the conversation and invites that sharing and invites that person into the conversation with you, into that communication flow. And then the last one I really want to touch on is, being mindful of our verbal and nonverbal communication. So I'm going to talk about this with your body language. Being mindful of the verbal and nonverbal is important because we as human beings, we respond to nonverbal communication before we respond to verbal communication. So if we walk up to someone and they are, closed off, they have their arms crossed, they're not looking at anyone, maybe they're standing away from everyone else, our cue is to think there's something wrong. Maybe they're upset, maybe they're mad. And often if we have that kind of initial gut reaction, we don't want to approach that person. And so if a participant is seeing a staff member who is closed off, who is not kind of interacting with everyone else, maybe they're, in their phone, that person doesn't seem open to them, and they're not going to seek that person out to kind of start building that relationship. So these are things to think about. Active listening is a learned skill. It's not something that everyone is naturally born with. So it's something to work at. And it's just something to be mindful of. We won't be perfect. No one is perfect at this 100% of the time. But it's just something to kind of keep at the top of your mind of how are you coming off to your participants? How are you setting that expectation of what they can expect from you in your communication with them? All right, great. So all of this kind of comes together because we are cultivating relationships with our participants. And our goal, as we've kind of been talking about, is to create these transformative interactions. It's not about transactions. So it's not, what do you need? Here's the task that's gotten done, right? So that's a transaction. But what we want to be cultivating is those transformative interactions. So how do you know if you are transacting versus transforming? So I want you to kind of just, you don't have to put this in the chat or, kind of unmute, but I want you to just think for yourself about the last interaction you had with a participant. So think about, it could have been this morning, right? It could have been yesterday. When was the last time you interacted with a participant? And I want you to think, were you prepared to meet with that participant? Did you greet them when they walked into your office or when you, walked up to them? Did you physically move away from the task that you were doing to have that interaction? What details do you recall from that interaction? Do you remember what was talked about? Do you remember what was said? Were they looking forward to meeting with you? So maybe you had a set meeting with them. Were they excited to come in and talk to you? And then this last one is kind of the most important one and kind of the simplest way to think about it. But did the conversation focus solely on technical aspects? Or did that participant share with you, how they felt about being in the program, what they were thinking about? Because it's when someone starts to share their thoughts and they start to share their feelings that you can tell that this is no longer just a transaction. This is not A plus B equals C. This is individuals connecting together and building that relationship. And why that's important is because ultimately the goal is not to just check off our trainees when they walk out the door. So, yep, NCCR certification, OSHA, first aid, you've graduated, good luck, right? We want to be building these relationships, not only for them, because these are going to be long-term impactful things that we're doing for them, but also because it helps to build that community within our organization, right? How many people talked about mentoring today? How many of you bring back alumni? These relationships really help to cultivate that community with your current students and your current participants and your former participants. So let's move on and kind of talk about what are the needs they're going to be looking for. So what are the needs that they might have? So some of you might be already familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you have heard of this before, if you can just raise your hand with your little hand emoji. Okay, so we have a couple of hands coming in. Eric's heard of it. Great. Lita, Nora, Amari. Awesome. Okay, great. Donna, great. Great. Elisa, awesome. So this is probably one of the most popular human motivation models. And so for those who are not familiar, kind of the crux of this hierarchy of needs is that we as human beings are not able to get to those higher levels on our hierarchy until our lower level needs are cared for. So you can see there's 5 categories here. So our the bottom layer is physiological needs. So it looks like we put psychological needs there, but it is physiological needs. So those are the items that are like food, water, shelter. Then we have safety needs. So this is when we start talking about security, employment, resources, health. We get up to love and belonging, and that's where we're thinking about friendship, family, a sense of community. Esteem is that next one. And so this is where we start to get into respect, recognition, strength, freedom. So this is also kind of confidence. So we talk a lot about our own self-esteem. That's at this level. And then self-actualization is that top level. And that's when all of our other needs are met. We can then self-actualize. So it's the idea that we are now able to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. So why is this important? Because we as Wraparound Service and Student Support Service, coordinators and supervisors are going to be addressing some of these base needs. So I want to move into a Mentee Meter question now. And I want you to think about kind of these 5 levels. So physiological, safety, love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization. So from these 5 levels, what categories do you often see that your participants are lacking in? So is it physiological needs? Is it those safety needs, self-esteem, maybe a sense of belonging, a community? So if you can just share in Mentee Meter, where are you seeing those needs kind of pop up most for your participants? Self-esteem, love and belonging. Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. Safety needs. Physiological self-actualization. Okay. Right. Absolutely. So it looks like you all are identifying that, there's an array of needs that we are addressing in these programs. And it's not just those physiological needs, but it's also creating that, helping them with that safety, creating that sense of belonging and community, helping them build confidence, giving them that recognition, helping them be the best version of themselves that they can be. So this is great. Thank you all for sharing that. And, obviously we know that these are important, but why are they important? Well, they're important because, as kind of Maslow's theory denotes, if we can't care for these lower level needs, we're not going to be able to get to those higher level needs. So I think we've all at some moment in our lives had a situation where we didn't have one of these needs met. So, I often like to give the example of if you've ever had your wallet stolen or forgotten your wallet at home, and suddenly you realize, well, shoot, I needed to pay a bill today, or I needed to go to the grocery, or I needed to do some other task, and now I can't meet that need. And suddenly you're distracted, right? So a few years ago, I had my laptop stolen out of my car. And all I could think about was someone is stealing my identity. They have access to my bank accounts, all of these things. Suddenly my security need was completely gone. I was terrified that someone was going to, hack all of my information, and I couldn't focus on anything else. I was not able to reach those higher levels. I wasn't able to get connected with, family and friends and get into that level of self-esteem and confidence because I was so concerned about that lower level need. And so that's what we're dealing with our participants. And it might be a stolen laptop. It might be not knowing where your child is going to be cared for, not knowing where transportation is going to come from. And so what we're doing with these wraparound and student support services and through the stipends is ensuring that those base level needs can either be eased or eliminated to allow them to move to those higher levels, to allow them to start to feel that belonging, to think about their future, to think about how they can become the best person that they can be, to build their confidence. All of those higher level aspects on the hierarchy can only be taken care of once they have these kind of basic needs addressed. So another aspect of why this is important is that it's also deeply linked with motivation. So in our programs, obviously all of our participants need to be motivated to move through our program. These programs are technically heavy. They might challenge them to skill sets that they don't have honed, right? So we're talking about tutoring of literacy or math, so they are going to need this kind of drive to move forward. And it's hard to kind of reach that motivation when those basic needs are standing in your way, because motivation is really kind of one of those higher level needs. So I want to touch really quickly on the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is the drive that we each have inside ourselves to move forward. So I'm guessing every single person on this call, because often people who get into public service have this intrinsic motivation. I'm guessing all of you on this call have this internal drive to do what you do, right? So no one kind of goes into nonprofit or public service because they think that there's going to be, millions and millions of dollars coming your way. We all show up because we know that when we show up each day, we have the opportunity to make an impact. We have an opportunity to give back. Those are intrinsic motivations. Changing our community, building up other people, helping others succeed. Those are all those intrinsic ways that we kind of drive our work forward. So I want to just switch over to a Mentee Meter really quick, and I want to be mindful of time, but I think this one's really important. So what are some intrinsic motivators that you have seen for your pre-apprentice participants? So what are the things that are driving your participants to go through this program, to succeed, to dedicate this time? So if you can just put those in the Mentee Meter for me, I would really appreciate that, and love to hear kind of what your participants are doing and why they're showing up to these programs. So for some of our participants, stipend. So stipend is actually an extrinsic motivator. So that's an external motivator. I will talk about that in just a second. But I mean, it is true that some might be showing up for the stipend. A better tomorrow than today, provide for their family, improve their situation over past generations. Absolutely. Absolutely. All internal motivators. They want to make a difference in their life. Absolutely. Provide for their family, get their education, the salary, the job that they want, stipend, food, job needed. So it's so important to have this intrinsic motivation, because when we think about the different types of motivation, what we know is that intrinsic motivation is that long-term motivation. So it's the thing that keeps us coming back every single day. It's the thing that even when we have a bad day, when we hear a story like the story that Dr. Gia told us earlier, it reminds us why we're there, and that's what gets activated. That's what pulls us back into the arena every time, even when we feel like we've gotten knocked down. So better life for their family. Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you all for sharing what they always wanted to do. Yeah, absolutely. This is their passion. They want to do this. They want to move forward in this career. So thank you all for sharing that. And then I just want to really briefly touch on extrinsic motivation. So someone brought up stipends. So stipends would be an extrinsic motivation. So that is external to you. So there is something outside of you, like a stipend, a reward, recognition, something that is driving you externally. So there's nothing wrong with external motivation. We have all been motivated to do something. I know I am a runner, but most of the time I run because I want a t-shirt and a medal, right? Like those are external motivations. But what's important to know is that external motivation has a limited time span. So it's not going to motivate people long term like that intrinsic, but it will kind of change behavior in the short term. So this is often when we think about the analogy, like a carrot versus a stick, right? The carrot is a reward, the stick is kind of a punishment or a disciplinary action. Those are those extrinsic rewards. And when we employ that extrinsic motivation, that's when we start to see eventually that those rewards or those disciplinary actions don't quite have the same impact. So just something to note, both effective, but it's trying to understand which one do you tap into. You want to tap into that intrinsic because that's going to give that long staying motivation. So that is the end of my section. We're going to move quickly on to the next section, which is very short, about partnerships. But if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Put it in the chat. I'm happy to answer it at the end here, or reach out to me via email. And I will hand it off to Dr. Clark to finish us out in the last couple of slides.
Okay, thank you so much, Christine. Like Christine stated, this is a very rather short section, but it's a very important section. So by the end of this particular section, you should be able to describe the role of partnerships and list potential partners and explain how an MOU formalizes a partnership. Okay, now once you have identified your target audience and their needs and assess your program's capabilities with respect to wraparound services and student support services, it's now time to consider opportunities for partnerships. Now, what partnerships, what they do is they allow you to comprehensively respond to wraparound services and student support services beyond the reach of your organization. Now, partners can create bridges that allow you to be comprehensive in responding to the needs of your pre-apprenticeship program participants. Now, your grant agreement requires partnerships. However, partnerships are also smart engagements for your pre-apprenticeship program. Now, you need to ask yourself these questions. Does your program have partnerships with local workforce areas, local and regional apprenticeship navigators, intermediaries focused on construction, building trades, union groups, community colleges, employers, employee associations, and secondary schools? Now, it is the expectation that pre-apprenticeship graduate and transition successfully into DOL registered apprenticeship programs. Now, given this, these partnerships are critical and they're very important because we really want the participants to succeed. We want them to not only graduate, but we want them to get into these registered apprenticeship programs. Now, your organization likely has different types of partnerships, such as contractors and vendors. These formal partnerships are typically with organizations through a memorandum of understanding or other type of written agreement. There are also less formal partnerships, such as unstructured referral networks, and these can still be strong and valuable relationships. Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about partnerships, so we won't do the Mentee Meters dealing with partnerships because, like I said, we've spent a lot of time talking about partnerships. So at this time, are there any questions before we proceed to the feedback section? Feel free to unmute your line or drop questions in the chat. Are there no questions?
There are no questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Gia. Now, we really want to hear from you and we appreciate your feedback. What it does, it helps us improve on the quality of our training. And we really thank you so much for your participation.
And I can pull up the, Yolanda, if now is a good time, I can go ahead and pull up the Mentee Meter feedback.
Okay, yes.
All right.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you. Okay, so let me pull that up now. If you have logged out of Mentee Meter or put down your electronic device and you've been logged out, if you could please log back in. We do collect feedback using Mentee Meter, and it is inside the chat. You can use an external device, so like a cell phone or a tablet, to log in really quick and just allow us to collect your feedback from this session. Okay, we just have a couple of questions. Here is the first one. You can rate this from 1 to 10. Please share your views on this training. The first one says, to what extent did it meet your expectations? The second one is, how likely are you to attend a similar event? And the third one is, how likely are you to recommend this to others? So if you could, please just quickly respond.
Okay.
All right, here's the second question. The course was relevant to what I wanted to learn about the subject matter. The first one is strongly agree. The last one is strongly disagree. Please choose the response that is appropriate for you. Again, all of the responses are confidential. This is just really helpful for us as we continue to consider how we're structuring these programs and our offerings in the future. Any others? Okay, great. Thank you. The next question is, I plan to apply what I learned. Okay, thank you. A few more questions here. What improvements might you recommend? So what is it that we can do different in the future to make this a better experience? This feedback is really important. Because of this, we have, this session is shorter. There are now breaks. I see someone is asking for more breaks. But we really do take this into account. We also are trying to do a better job of clarifying the target audience for each of the sessions. So anything else that you think we can do to make this better? Okay, great. This is helpful. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, what did you find effective? So we are we always make adjustments to improve the quality of these. So is there anything in particular that if we make changes, this is something we should not change? So whatever changes we make, these are things we should absolutely keep. Mhm. Okay, great. Ah, someone says this new meeting platform. I can tell you right now, Christine is happy to hear um, not just that feedback, but that you all recognize that we've tried to make some changes to improve this. Yeah, there we go. I don't know how many platforms and versions of Webex she looked at for this, but it took some work to narrow this down. Okay, this is awesome. Okay, great. Thank you. And this is the last question. Anything else we need to know that we did not think to ask about? Anything else you would like us to know we did not think to ask about? Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, supplemental materials. There are a lot of tools now that are actually in the grantee manual. I know during our earlier sessions, we provided a lot of tools because we had not published the full grantee manual, but a lot is in there. And this session, along with the slides, will be available in workNet for you to access. So hopefully that'll be helpful also. Oh, that's so Christine, you might be pleased to hear kind of the shout out for the women in construction session workshops. They were amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And Yolanda delivered the data for those. Any other feedback? All right, thank you all so much for your time today, and I will turn this back over to Yolanda and Christine to allow you all to close out if there's anything else. Christine, do you have information around the next session?
So then I will have information about the next session coming out in the coming days. Since this platform was appreciated and it worked well for us, I will be sending out kind of a new link because we will probably be switching all of our future trainings to this platform. So please look out for that along with additional information. Thank you all so much for coming. I do want to just address a comment that was made in the chat. As one of the suggestions was to put the appendix forms separated into individual documents. I just want to note all of the templates, all of the exhibits are available as individual documents in the Illinois Works Partner Guide in the resource section. So please go ahead and check those out. They're all available to you. Templates are in a Word doc version, so you can modify them. Exhibits are in a PDF version because those are the required documents of Illinois Works. But please go and check those out. Thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you.